let's make a start, and then people will join as they do. Normally, these are informal sessions. So we have a speaker in. This time we've got Becka to come speak to us about how to be seen without losing yourself. It's been really great as the storytelling community has been running. It's now been running for about 3 years. We have a regular sort of cadence of speakers. And normally our meetings follow the same format. Speaker speaks for 20 minutes or as long as they need to. Please stick questions in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat, and then we can ask questions at the end and have a further discussion. Becka, would you prefer people kept questions for the end? Or
yeah, that's okay. That'd be really helpful. Thank you. And I also do have a bit of a reflective activity at the end as well. I hope that's okay to run through that as well if we have time.
Oh, of course, we have the time, so let's use it well. So without further ado, Becka, the floor's yours.
Amazing. Thank you, Bryn. Let me just share my screen. It's just all loading up. Is that all visible? Is that all okay, Bryn?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So welcome and welcome to today. Let me just quickly go back to my little screen. So here we go. So today I'm going to be covering how to be seen without losing yourself. So I'm Becka Wilson from Amazingly Humans. And I'm really glad that you're here today. Just to kind of pre-warn you, it's going to be quite an interactive session. But before you hang up, I promise there's no breakout rooms, no awkward icebreakers, but I will be asking for reflections in the chat. But I would like just to kind of say there's no pressure to share, so only share what you feel comfortable with. So the next kind of hour is to create a bit of a space to pause, reflect and reconnect with your voice. The session is, as Bryn has said, is being recorded. Slides won't be shared, but I do encourage you to take notes and screenshots of anything you kind of want to refer back to. And I do appreciate it's prime lunchtime, so I appreciate people are probably having their lunch, but if you can put your cameras on when it's appropriate to do so, it'd be lovely to see people's faces. And as Bryn kind of mentioned, there will be time at the end for questions, so please do make a note and we can go through them at the end. So before I delve into who I am, I just want you to all to take a moment in the chat just to introduce yourselves and also kind of what brought you here, what brought you here for the webinar today, what are you hoping to get out of it? It'd be really good to see who's here. And to share, as we're going through that, to share a few things about myself and my life. I am a self-confessed introvert. I prefer deep conversations over small talk. I love animals and recently did yoga in a field with alpacas. I have 2 dogs called Roger and Norman. That's Roger in the photo right there. I have 10 chickens, 1 cockerel, and you will notice throughout this presentation there is a dog theme. So as we go through the slides, I hope it brings a bit of a smile to your face how I've linked the dog pictures to the slides. So hopefully that brightens up your day. I have an unhealthy obsession with takeout coffee and pastry, so you now know how to bribe me. My party trick is that I can perfectly center texts and documents without any guidelines, and yep, that's how cool I am. And I'm passionate about making a difference, and I love problem solving and connecting the dots to complex issues. So I bet when you thought that I was going to introduce myself that I would start with my job title followed by various milestones throughout my career. But I'd like you to kind of reflect on how much more does what I just shared with you actually tell you about myself and who I am as a person over this. So by day, I work for the NHS, and by night, I'm the founder of Amazingly Human. I've had a wiggly career starting 10 years in the private sector, designing children's books, craft kits, and branding and marketing for farm shops and garden centres. I've been with the NHS for 7 years, working in comms and engagement, health inequalities and EDI, and elective and diagnostics. So whenever you meet someone in a meeting, I bet most of the time the conversation goes to yourself and your job title. But I just want to kind of reflect that that's not your whole identity. That's just one layer of yourself, and you have many different layers of who you are, the different experiences you've had, your passions, and your different roles in your life. So based on that, I want us to go a little bit deeper into getting to know each other. So in the chat, can you share something that you're really passionate about or that you love doing in your spare time? And I just want to take this moment as a kind of key takeaway to say that you are in control of how you introduce yourself and your story. I appreciate in kind of work meetings, you have to introduce yourself and your job title, but I do challenge you the next time you have to introduce yourself, how you can expand slightly on why you're in that meeting and where you're thinking you're going to add value. So, for example, in my NHS role, hi, I'm Becka Wilson. I'm head of cancer programs, and I'm keen to see how we can incorporate the patient voice and experience in the way that we do pathway redesign. So I want to do a quick check-in with you all. I appreciate people today will turn up with lots of different emotions, and none of them are right or wrong. It's a part of being human, and I want to acknowledge that with all the changes happening in the NHS, people will be feeling a whole array of different emotions, and every single emotion is completely valid. So quickly pop in the chat, how are you kind of feeling today? And I thought, what better way to do that than Chihuahua style? So let me know in the chat what Chihuahua you feel like today. So for example, I was about a 1 before my morning coffee. I was about a 2 before I jumped on this call, feeling a little bit nervous, hoping that the session goes well. 7 is probably where I'm about now, still feeling a little bit nervous, but happy and content. And I'll probably, because of my introverted self, I'll probably be about an 8 after I finish this call. I love this coming in. Lots of people talking about different dogs and stuff. That's amazing. Perfect. So yeah, let me know in the chat which Chihuahua you think you are. So we're going to explore why visibility can feel hard. And when you hear the word visibility, I want to kind of understand what that feels for you. What emotions does that bring up for you? So again, in the chat, let me know when you hear the word visibility, what does that mean to you? It may ignite an array of different emotions. So for some, it may feel exposing and scary, and you may want to hide like the pup in the photo. For others, it may be invigorating and exciting. But for a lot of people, visibility will feel hard, and there are reasons for that. We're taught to show up in spaces where we need to fit in, and that fitting in feels safe. So we create a performance in how we show up that aligns with the language, politics, aesthetics, that what we deem to be kind of normal. And we create areas of our lives to fit in with that ideology. So how we feel we need to look, act, and sound. And that pressure to keep up that appearance of being constantly confident, consistently visible, is really hard to maintain. And because of that, and creating that presence, we put on this performance, and because of that we overcompensate to kind of fit in, to hide our vulnerabilities, and to stay quiet because it sometimes feels safer, easier, and less draining. And I want to kind of take a moment to pause and just get a sense of, does any of that kind of resonate with you?
I'm seeing lots of nods on the camera
That's
and in the
good to
chat.
know. Thank you, Bryn. And so there is a cost to staying in that performative space. So in different areas of people's lives, people learn to edit their identity, their communication style, their needs and personality in order to fit in and to be taken seriously. And as I mentioned, there's a huge cost to that because everyone starts to sound the same. It stifles creativity, new ideas, perspectives, and it limits innovation. You end up dulling and quieting down and hiding parts of yourself, which means that you're then not feeling fulfilled, and it is exhausting putting on this performance. So you lose that energy and that motivation. And because of that constant editing of yourself, parts of that performance actually start to go on autopilot. So you actually end up starting to question yourself and what actually feels and sounds like you. So I want to take a moment just to kind of pause on this quote, and please do take a photo of it to kind of remind you yourself when you feel like you're shifting back into that kind of performance state. And performance says, look at me. So that is that constant editing, fitting in, creating in a particular way, in areas that you're trying to portray in your life. And it's focused on that external validation. Whereas that presence, so that I'm here, it goes deeper. So it's looking at that, it's coming from that place of self-trust and being comfortable with who you are, what you bring and what you want to be visible for. And it puts you in control of how you want to be visible. So for people who are struggling to shift out of that performative visibility into being more present and authentic, here's kind of a 3-step roadmap to help make that achievable and build that in a way that actually feels safe. So that's know yourself, trust yourself, and express yourself. And we'll go into the steps for these in further details on the following slides. So the first stage is to know yourself, and I encourage you to put some focused time aside to do a piece of reflection to help you get to know yourself better. Sort of kind of 30-40 minutes would be perfect to help you get back in touch with your authentic self and what actually feels deeply important to you. So spend some time jotting down what could you spend hours talking about, what really lights you up and excites you. Where are the places in your life where you actually want to show up more authentically, and be more visible? And find a few core areas that are important to you. And start to build kind of that greater understanding of that authentic self. Where do you want to be spending your energy and what do you want to be known for? And if you're struggling to pin some of these down, I have actually created a couple of prompts to help you kind of become a bit more clear around that. So again, if it's helpful, do take a photo or screenshot so you can refer back to this when you create some reflection time. And the first is, what do I want to be known for and why? And that why is actually really important, because it's coming from instead of it coming from a place of performance, it's coming from a place of wanting to be present and authentic. And the second one is, if someone described you in 3 words, what would you want them to be? And that's really helps you understand your values and what's important to you. So moving on to the trust yourself, the next step, once you've understood kind of your values, what you want to be known for, and where you want to be more visible in your life, it's then about starting to build that self-trust. So this goes back to the slide where what I shared around the present says, I'm here. So for you to take the next step of being authentically visible, this needs to come from a place of internal validation. If you're waiting for external validation, or if you're waiting until you feel more confident, you will always remain in that space where you're dulling parts of yourself. The first exercise is the first exercise around the getting to know yourself, which we covered in the previous slide, will really help you identify a couple of core places in your life where you want to be more authentic in and where you want to be showing up more visibly in. So I really encourage you to focus here first. You don't need to share everything about yourself. Remember at the start of the presentation where I shared who I am. You are in control of your own story and what you want to put out into the world. And if it starts to feel overwhelming, or if you're starting to feel a bit exposed, check in with yourself and your energy to check that alignment of where's this coming from in terms of the know yourself exercise. So if you're feeling energized, even if it's coming from a place of feeling scared or vulnerable, this is likely coming from a place of your authentic self. So keep pushing through the discomfort. However, if it's coming from a place where it's draining you or it's feeling like that kind of upward challenge, this is a sign to kind of realign what's important to you and going back to that know yourself exercise so that you can start to shift away from being that in that performative space. And it's completely normal for you to shift back into that performative space. As mentioned, some of these behaviors will be so rehearsed that they're just completely on autopilot. But by building that self-awareness of when you're most likely to kind of slip back into them performance habits, you'll be able to spot it and stop it quicker and refocus yourself on what's important to you. And lastly, listen to your gut. So your energy is a great gauge and will help you to build that inner trust so that you can have that confidence that you're heading in the right direction towards your authentic self. So I've just shown a couple of resources that really helped me build the self-trust on my own personal journey, and they're both a couple of podcasts. So the first is Brené Brown, The Power of Vulnerability, which is a TED Talk. And the second is the Mel Robeson podcast, which is this research study will change how you think about your entire life. And I promise it actually did. It's not clickbait. It did actually really change how I was thinking about life. So recommend you giving them both a listen to when you have some time. And if anyone has any other resources that they love around kind of building self-trust, being more authentic, really love for you to share them in the chat and see the different resources that others have found useful. I think that'd be really helpful to share what others have found. And then the final stage is to express yourself. And as I've previously mentioned, you don't need to share everything about you and your life. Focus on a couple of core places where you have decided that are important for you to start showing up more authentically, visibly, and really start small. This could be speaking up in a meeting where you've been wanting to share your ideas, posting one post online about a reflection that you've been wanting to share, or even something as small as kind of wearing that piece of clothing that you love but you've been felt worried about that it's too much. Think about how you want to show up in these spaces and find them small actions to help you shift towards this vision. Think about how you want to sound, feel, and the impact you want to make. And a few ways that you could start to achieve this is through storytelling. So with you all being part of a storytelling community, I really don't need to convince the converted about how powerful storytelling is. But remember, you're in control of your story and how you want to tell it. And have a think about how you can actually start to tell your story in these spaces. We're also really good at sharing the end result in terms of when we've achieved something or completed something. However, the journey is never kind of a linear path. We always have kind of them ups and downs along the way as we encounter challenges and successes. So I do encourage you going forwards when you want to be more visible in these areas to share your process. Not only will this start to break down that curated way that we portray ourselves, it will also help build deeper connections with people because of that vulnerability of sharing them wins and them struggles. It will help build trust and relatability with others. Authentic visibility is not about convincing people that you're an expert. Being authentically visible is about moving away from that performative look at me persona and building something deeper that encourages connections. And I have a bit of a story myself that I wanted to share with you that happened to me recently. And I'm in the process of starting a new role, and I created a post on LinkedIn about that, just asking genuinely wanting to connect with people to understand what work was already happening in that space. And I was genuinely actually quite overwhelmed by the responses, as I really wasn't expecting to get many replies from it. But I took the time to respond to everyone that commented, and I got intro calls booked in for anyone that was interested. And what really took me aback was a comment that someone on one of the calls actually said. And they said that they were genuinely touched that I had made the time to have a call, and how they commented, and how they also commented on how so many people say that they want to connect but don't actually mean it. And it actually got me really, like, I didn't think much about this kind of an intro course. It didn't really faze me in terms of didn't see it as that big of action. But what it got me thinking about was how actions speak so much louder. And if you take one thing away from today, let it be that showing up authentically means that it's to role model and to follow through with what you say you're going to do. It's not about just using your voice. It's not about being louder. It's about how can you make your actions more visible and impactful. So trying to kind of piece all what we kind of covered through together, I just want to take some time to do a bit of a reflective exercise, and I think we're quite good for time at the moment, so that's really good. So what I would like you to do is just to grab a pen and a piece of paper, and we'll dive in and we're just going to work through each of these. Thanks, Bryn, for demonstrating what a piece of pen and paper is. And and we're just going to work through these questions individually. And if you are happy to do so, as we work through the questions, I'd love for you to share your reflections of what's coming up for you, but only share whatever you feel comfortable with. So the first question is, when do I feel most like myself? And I'm just going to literally pause here just for a few moments and let you kind of jot that down and have a think about that. That's a really interesting reflection, Isabella, where you said I feel most like myself when I'm not at work. Does that sound silly? I don't think that sounds silly. I think that actually sounds, that's really interesting, isn't it? And it's almost how are you seeing them two areas of yourself quite separately, and how could you potentially bring elements of yourself in small, safe ways to help you feel a bit like they're not two separate entities. Awesome. So we'll move on to the next question, which is, what does being seen mean to me? I love that, Kate. Riding my horses, my time, my space, my enjoyment. I'm guessing that's kind of where you're in your flow and you just can switch off and let just be yourself. Amazing. There's definitely a sense of, I feel like it's when you connect with nature, there's definitely some calming, kind of coming home presence within that. Oh, that's really pretty. That's really nice. At home and playing with the kids. Amazing. Thank you everyone for sharing them reflections. And so what does being seen mean to you then? Looking at what feels most like yourself, what does being seen mean to me? It's beautiful. Being seen is being understood and free to bring out my authentic self without the need to pretend. Not being afraid to be honest and saying what I think without holding back. So definitely around using your voice. I think that's a really important one, Kat, around not having to feel like I'm constantly needing to prove myself and manage people's expectations. That's a really powerful one. Love that. And then just to finish all of that up, what one small authentic action could I take away this month and action that? So for you, Isabella, it may be around how can I actually feel more like myself at work? What small action could I do in that space? Love that. Practicing being present in the moment in my current experience. And it goes back to kind of breaking that autopilot, breaking them habits that where we are trying to do that performance and trying to fit in. How can we kind of break down some of them habits that we've learned to bring some more of that vulnerability and our authentic presence into that? Yeah, making time to pause. Be more present and not always hold back. Amazing. Yeah. Where can you start in a way that you feel safe? Start using your voice. That's amazing. Thank you ever so much for indulging me in that. I think we don't always we don't always make the time to have that reflective space and just kind of take stock. So I hope that was helpful. But yeah, if you want to, I appreciate you may not have probably worked through all of them, but again, if you want to take a photo or a screenshot and come back to that at a later date, then please do. And just to wrap up, I just want to say thank you ever so much for your time today. I really hope that you found what we've covered valuable and that there was something that you can kind of take away today in action. If you enjoyed what I had to say and you would like to stay connected, there are a few ways that we can do that. I'm in the process of designing a 6 to 8 week authenticity visibility program, and I'm looking for a small cohort to be guinea pigs to beta test it for me. So if that is of interest and you're happy to be a guinea pig, please do pop your email in the chat and I'll reach out once details have been finalised. I also offer one-to-one coaching, so help people to achieve their goals and becoming more authentic, whether that's in a space of work, personal or online goals. So I can share my email in the chat. So if anyone did want to have a conversation about that, then please do drop me an email. And then finally, if you want to stay connected, do connect with me on LinkedIn. I think we do have plenty of time for questions, but when we get off the call, if you're having lunch or having a shower or doing a piece of work and you were like, oh crap, really wish I'd asked that question, do drop me a message on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that do pop up after we've finished for today. And equally, if you do want to share any reflections about the session, I always do welcome feedback as well. So that's all from me, and I'll pass it back over to Bryn.
Firstly, just giving a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank
And and as I said in the chat, it's not at all an indulgence. It's actually forcing us to take time and to take some time to sort of reflect and enjoy. I mean, I had loads of questions and a combination
That's a bit I'm worried about, Bryn.
questions and observations. suppose first, because I was, I was furiously jotting down notes, and in the first step where you say kind of knowing yourself, how do you give yourself permission to take that time?
Mm.
What would be your top hint for the people who are like, yes, 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 I know I've got to do it, but I've got work and I've got kids and I've got dogs, clearly loads of dogs. How do you give yourself permission to do that?
So I've recently completed the Elizabeth Anderson Garrett program, and we had our action learning sets. And I'm going to quote someone that a piece of advice that someone actually from an action learning set gave me, and it was to put your oxygen put your oxygen mask on first. And I think we can quite often have our to-do list and have our other priorities, and we put everyone else first, and then we get to the end of the day of that to-do list and we've run out of time and we've actually not looked after ourselves. So we're not then bringing our whole selves and our best selves to them places. A perfect example for me today is like I've not been very good at putting my health and well-being first. My exercise, I like to be active enough. That's something that's completely slipped from me. And today, feeling the nerves of this webinar, I thought, right, I'm going to go out, wake up early, go for a run, and that's going to be so. I put myself first before anything else at that start of the day. And I think we can quite often, we'll always have a to-do list. It'll always just keep growing. It will never end. So if we can find opportunities, if it even is like 30, 20 minutes, just to do one thing for ourselves, even if it is that reflective session to help you get to know yourself, I think that could be really beneficial in helping you then bring your more authentic self and yourself in a much weller way in other areas of your life.
And I suppose actually, as you were talking, I was also thinking signing up to webinars like this one could also be a good way to enforce some reflection time, because I've recently been taking a coaching qualification, and I found that the requirement that I write down everything I've done to embed my learning, it's and they need a big old spreadsheet and it feels like a bit of a pain in the backside. But then I'm going, well, actually, this is forcing me to reflect on what I'm learning, and it's forcing me to build in time to learn, which I find enriching throughout my day. So, well, bravo, I suppose everyone by signing up's then taking a little bit of a first step.
Yeah, and I think also with all the restructures and the change happening, it is a very draining time at the moment. And I think going on to sessions like this, thinking about how can I portray myself in the best way through the challenges I'm now about to have to face, even if it is signing up to a webinar like this, or as I said, kind of taking 30 minutes to think about what have I achieved in the last year as well. I think we can quite often, as I said, kind of just get in that roller coaster of moving forwards, and we quite often forget to reflect back on what actually have we achieved. And if we take that time to go back and have a think about, even in that last year, what I've achieved, I think there'll be quite a lot of things that people can go back and actually make a list of, and that's really important to be celebrated.
I mean, I'm going. If anyone has questions, put your hands up or just butt in. Otherwise, I'm going to keep talking. There was something else that really struck me, and when you talked about that pressure to fit in and perform, kind of leads to you sort of editing who you are. And there's something that came out of it was in narrative therapy. There's a concept of thick and thin stories. And they found like the thin story is often the story that has been told about you by other people, or that you feel you have to fit into. It's like, this is the thing I have to do because I'm a project manager at band blah, whatever, in such and such an organization. Or this is the type of person I am. I've always been told I'm too quiet or too noisy. And those thin stories can start to dictate how you engage with your life, and they lead to a lot of the problems. Part of the narrative therapeutic approach is finding those alternative, more authentic stories and practicing telling those stories you tell about yourself more and more often. And those are the thick stories that you then build out with detail and complexity, and they represent you more fully than the more fully as a rounded human than the thin stories you often end up having been told about yourself elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's that internal dialogue is so powerful, isn't it, as well, Bryn? And I know from calls that we've had, when I've tried to kind of I've been with sense check me fitting into certain places, and you've gone, where's the evidence behind that? And actually, I've not had any evidence at all in that internal dialogue. So I think it's also taking that time to go, what evidence have I got to prove that I should be fitting in this certain way, or actually is it my internal dialogue and should I challenge that?
Somebody actually gave me a really good hint once, is to say, when you're going into like a situation that's getting you stressed, be it like an interpersonal interaction or thinking about a piece of work or an upcoming job interview, is just to pause and say, what is the story I'm telling myself about this?
Mm-hmm.
I found myself sort of having to pause and go, oh, actually, I was getting all ready to get into conflict, like with another team, because the story I was telling myself in my head was, this team don't want to work with me, and you're going to have to, you're going to have to fight your way in. And I thought, oh, actually, that story's not always helpful. And the more I've done this, I've actually found it quite fun to sometimes tell the people the story you're telling, saying like, I'm telling myself a story that you don't like me and you don't want me to be here. Now help me with this.
How's that
And
gone, Bryn, when you've done that?
um, it's actually been quite fun. I mean, it's been very reassuring. Um, Occasionally I've realized, having done it, that sometimes that actually puts them in an awkward spot, not because they genuinely don't want me there. It's because suddenly they feel, oh gosh, have we made you feel bad? I'm so sorry, we didn't mean to. And I'm like, no, 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 this is my story. It's all in my head. It's not what you're doing, but just help me with this one. And so it's been, yeah, it certainly puts a different dynamic. But if that
Yeah.
feels too scary, even just saying it in your own head is helpful. Because I'm terrible. My wife calls me out all the time. It's like, when I go off weirdly about something, she's like, what story are you telling yourself? And I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, sorry, I'm getting all up in my stories and my feels. I need to sort of take a step back. But I'm seeing you getting cohorts and volunteers in the test.
Good to see there's some guinea pigs that are happy to be guinea pigged.
Oh, and yeah, were there any questions or observations from people in the group? No, people happily listening, because I had another one, because I thought this chimed, because it's a storytelling community. I know when I first started doing storytelling, and part of the reason I got into it was because it always just seemed a strand of myself that I needed permission to bring out into the open, and I needed to give myself permission to do this. And creating this community has been a way to make sure I keep doing that. Um, but the other thing I thought was, because we were always dealing a lot with change and program management, I thought, gosh, if I could find and tell the most compelling story ever, then people would just get on and do the change that I want them to do. So I was very much thinking about stories as a way to influence.
Mm.
And the more I've done it, I've realized that, yeah, maybe a really good story would work 50 to 70% of the time to influence people. But what always happens accidentally is that connection. And to speaks to what you said about speak to connect, not convince.
Yeah.
And I think that's been something that's sometimes unacknowledged in the stories you tell. I mean, you told us about your dog, and the chat was full of dog chat. You had built that connection with with the audience. And I think that's something that we undervalue sometimes with our stories.
Yeah, I think it goes back to kind of the who I am when I introduced myself. I think the way that I did it, it showed various different like areas of myself that other people could find relatable and potentially connect with. So it kind of already, before I've even kind of dived into the presentation, it's already starting to break some of them barriers down.
And I've got a great question in the chat now from Teo in the chat. So,
Yeah.
Becka, as a leader or a team member, is there such a thing as, in quotes, being too vulnerable or open? Does current culture or environment have a part to play, especially where cancel culture exists? Can one be too open?
I think you can. I think there is an element of like being, as you said, kind of too open. And that's why I kind of focused on finding a few areas where you want to be more visible in. So being quite what's the word, intentional around where you want to be more visible. So it's not about kind of sharing everything about yourself. It's not about sharing all your deepest, darkest secrets. There is particularly in like the corporate world, there is always going to be a level of understanding the politics and working around that. But I do think that there is definitely an opportunity to be a lot more authentic in them spaces. So how I would focus on it is where, going back to kind of the actions, is how can I use my authenticity? Where am I passionate about? Where can I bring more of them influences in them spaces? So yeah, it's not, and I get cancel culture is quite a scary thing. There is a lot more focus on not wanting to say the wrong thing, but I think if what you're saying is coming from a place of best intentions and wanting to do the right thing, and coming from a place of passion and making that impact, I think you should be safe. It's yeah, but there is definitely, and that's why I wanted to focus on you guys finding spaces where you feel safe to start practicing some of that, because there will be areas where it may not feel safe, or it may not be the best place to do it. So finding places where you can test the waters, see what works, see how it feels as well, because it can be quite scary to start stepping into that space. So, and how you want to use your voice can take a little while to find out what actually works for you and what feels like a nice fit.
Yeah, there's a lot in the answer about sort of focusing on where it feels most important to be authentic, finding places you feel safe, acknowledging that not everywhere is safe.
Which is a shame. Not everywhere can be safe. That in a perfect world, it would be great, wasn't it? That you could be your authentic self in every space possible.
And I think another, like building on like an adage from sort of storytelling, which I found quite helpful, is to speak from scars, not from wounds. So like if it's if it's like a traumatic event you had, or a really difficult situation, but it's healed, you can tell people about that. If it's still bleeding a little bit, probably be careful. I know I've made that mistake sometimes, is sharing something that I'm still working through, be it in a team dynamic or personally, and that can sometimes jar. I think the other thing, as you were talking, and I'm as Taya said about when you're being a leader, it's like I've definitely made the mistake of being too open in the wrong forum. And then go, ooh, that didn't work. But I think there's something we can do as leaders to really model this type of communication that we value, and the thing that made me reflect on it was that I was giving storytelling training to a local council who were talking about, we're doing this large sort of public health campaign, and we need to get all the aspects of public health being confident in telling their own story. And as part of that, I shared a very vulnerable story about my mental health. And what was really interesting is to see the different reactions between individual team members, because then later I shared the story, and then weeks later I did a workshop with the team, and the difference in reflection between team members and one of the public health consultants.
Mm.
The individual team members were saying to me, we'd love to share more of these quite raw stories, but I don't think we get permission. And the public health consultant was telling me, you probably you really need to trigger warn all your stories, and we probably need to be more trauma informed and share less of these. And it made me think, actually, what is the message that the team's hearing there?
Yeah.
I mean, I took away the message, yes, be careful, make sure you don't accidentally re-traumatize people, 100%. But I thought, how many times do we as leaders inadvertently say to the teams, actually, you best not say that. So there's a lot that we can do to sort of model what we would, find acceptable in others.
Yeah, and I feel like there's also a space of role modeling the environments that we want to create to help others be more authentic in themselves as well. So how do we build them safe spaces and create that psychological safety and that trust as ourselves as leaders, so that we can encourage others to be more authentic in themselves, because that's where we're going to get the greatest innovation and creativity and ideas, if we build them environments where that can flourish.
Yeah. And yeah, and it comes almost full circle. And again, this isn't about managing through emotional fragility. Do you know what I mean? Like going off, like, I've had this terrible traumatic thing, and everyone in your team goes, oh gosh, now we've got to avoid treating Rebecca differently. It's more saying, like, these are the experiences I'm bringing to the job.
Yeah, and I think going back to your scars analogy, I think that's a really powerful place to come from, is actually, once them scars are beginning to heal, how can I use that experience to bring a sense of empowerment or relatability, or help someone else through the stories and the experiences that I've been through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hope that's answered your question, Teo. But it's a really good, and there's no perfect answer to these things. When you're saying things that remind you to be authentic, when I'm feeling particular, I also find oddly certain songs. There's one song by it's a post-punk band from New York, very lo-fi, very amateurish, a guy called Jeffrey Lewis. And he's got this song called Exactly What Nobody Wanted. And he's singing about, like, this incredible song which nobody liked at all. It precisely had an impact of 0, but it was amazing. And I sometimes play that song to myself when I'm about to do something risky, to say, you know what, I'm just going to take a swing for the fences on this one. And if nobody likes it, that's quite all right. And that kind of reminds me to be suitably myself, without worrying
That
too much
builds
about
back
what.
to the self-trust, doesn't it? So if you are coming from that place of authenticity, yes, some things are never going to land right, and that's fine. It's but you're coming from it from a place of self-trust, and that builds that confidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, oh, thank you. No, and that's good to hear. I was like, yeah, actually, that is what it does. Anyway, I'm conscious of the time. We've got 10 minutes left, and I always forget to give a bit of a heads up to some of the upcoming events that the HPCA is running, because a lot of these events are free, and at a time when we're going through a lot of change, there is always a perfect. It's always a perfect time to invest a little bit in your development. Sorry, I'm just having to open up the slide deck, which gives the events. Give me a moment to share. if I am able. So this is a little bit of more information on what the Healthcare and Project and Change Association does. So if you haven't signed up to them, do. We've got a number of community webinars coming up. So there's something about ambient voice technology. There's my AI assistant asking me how it can help summarize my document. Building influence to deliver successful projects and change, and then AI apprenticeship. And weirdly, I find a lot of the discussions around AI tend to loop back to how do we keep those authentically human elements that we want. There's a number of regional networks. So if you aren't part of some of the HPCA regional networks, please do join in. And then there's a number of essential elements, sort of HPCA essentials. So different essentials training courses that you can use to build up your knowledge, skills, and experience. And if you want to invest a bit more, change management, neuroscience for change, becoming a change ninja, and then my personal plug for storytelling and storytelling courses, which we run throughout the year. And then those are some of the masterclasses. I've run workshops, masterclasses, keynotes. And then my own shameless plug is that if you're particularly interested in the darker side of stories or crime fiction, there's a crime non-fiction book, which I wrote a couple of years back. I didn't know that slide was there, and now I feel slightly embarrassed. But those, if you are part of sort of an HPCA client organization, also there are some additional offers coming up though, and we're just, the HPCA is also just started a collaboration with TEDx NHS. So you will see on the HPCA website more information about the upcoming TEDx NHS event in October in London. So please do, if you feel like a Sunday in London, grab a ticket, go down there. Their theme, their topic this year is around stories of hope. And we are hoping to then have an HPCA storytelling session there and a series of storytelling sessions where we combine our forces with TEDx NHS. So that'll be coming up in future and hopefully give us more opportunity to practice being authentic and being seen. So wonderful. That's everything from me. Thank you again, Becka.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for making your time over lunch. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you for creating the time for us. And if everyone gives her a round of applause, and then we can head off for the afternoon or for our lunch breaks feeling even more inspired.